Welcome to Transform and Transformational, the Teach Beyond podcast. I'm Kian.
And I'm Heather. We're here to explore what it means to be transformed in our own lives and how that overflows to living lives of transformational impact in our communities.
And in my house today, we are actually in the middle of spring break. So I think that means in the world of working from home and working remote, my kids will probably interrupt us at least at one point during this episode. So yeah, I don't think my kids have understood that spring break means they should actually just be outside, but what can you do?
Yes, I'm sure they're enjoying their time off, and a little bit of happy noise in the background is not a bad thing.
Exactly.
Well, our guest today is Paul Snider, who worked with Donna Kushner to create Worlds Here and There, an activity book for international transition. So, we're talking with Paul about how this book came about and how it can be used for anyone who is making a move from one part of the world to another, whether relocating for the first time or returning to a familiar place. You can visit worldshereandthere.com or click on the link in the show notes to learn more and get a copy.
Paul grew up as a missionary kid in Jamaica. He then attended Vanderbilt University in Nashville, Tennessee, and ever since then has been working with MK to MK, a ministry of Crew, serving MKs or missionary kids. He and his wife live in Orlando, Florida.
Let's go over to that conversation with Paul now. Welcome to the podcast, Paul.
Thanks for having me.
Hi, Paul. We are so excited to have you on the podcast. And just to get started, to kind of place you, we know that you're an MK and you grew up in Jamaica. So I'm super curious. I think all MKs have this kind of story of what did you grow up with in Jamaica that you kind of thought, hey, this is normal. This is how life works. And then you show up back in America and you're like, oh, wait, I see there's some difference here.
Yeah, I think one of the fun things of growing up in Jamaica was the beach. Like people often ask first, kind of like, how close to the beach did you live? Like that's what they think of when they think of Jamaica. And even though we lived in kind of the mountains, like in a cooler place, my dad was all about going to the beach. He was like, we can't live on an island and not go to the beach as often as we can. And so it's really funny for me still when I meet someone and they've never seen the ocean. Like when I met my wife, I found out she'd lived in Oklahoma, which is landlocked. And so she'd never seen the ocean until she was in college. And so I'm still like, man, what is that like to have never seen the ocean when it's so normal, it surrounds us.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think that still like surprises me when people tell me that.
Yeah. How often do you get to visit Jamaica now, Paul? I believe your mom still lives there.
Yeah, we try to go back every other year.
Okay.
It's nice that Orlando is one direct Southwest flight away from
Nice.
Jamaica, and so it's great to go back and see my mom. But it's getting probably less and less. I find like
Yeah.
as a TCK now, it's like the longer I'm in America, the more American I
Mm-hmm.
feel, the more at home I feel here, and that's great in some ways. But I also am, it's like I'm slowly losing that part
Mm.
of me that's still in Jamaica.
Yeah.
And so when I go
Yeah.
back, it's nice to be like, oh, this is who I am still. Like this is
Yeah.
familiar. I love this place.
Well, Paul, you lead a ministry called MK to MK. So can you tell us a little bit more about that?
Yeah. So MK and MK, we're part of Crew, a missions organization, but our specific ministry is to any MK anywhere. And our name stands for missionary kid to missionary kid. So the whole idea is equipping older missionary kids to disciple and encourage and care for younger missionary kids. So we start that simple with a summer internship where we bring college MKs on a summer mission where they're leading high school MKs. That's where it begins and where we train them, equip them, and grow them. And that's actually how I first got involved with MK to MK. Is that I came as an intern, learned a lot, and was like, wow, give me more of this. How can I do this for the rest of my life? And beyond that, we do trips to visit missionary families. We invite missionaries kids into community here in Orlando. So we do some local Bible studies and kind of large group, kind of like a youth group for MKs in Orlando. And those are things that are open to any organization, any MK. On our summer missions as well, we invite any TCKs too. Like we often will have a military kid or someone else who identifies with this community and maybe has experience at an international school or elsewhere. And they experience a lot of the same things and want to grow and serve the Lord. And so that's where we open up our community too.
Yeah, yeah. Well, you're talking about this experience that may be unique to third culture kids, to missionary kids. Can you tell us about your experience identifying as an MK or a missionary kid? Is that a label that you have always been proud to have? Is that something you've been hesitant to accept?
Yeah, I think my journey with that is kind of unique because now leading an organization that has MK in the title. It's funny that probably 0 to 19, I never thought of myself as a missionary kid because I
Huh.
was born in Jamaica. I have dual citizenship, and so I viewed myself as like, well, I'm Jamaican and my parents are
Mhm.
American, and that's kind of what I would tell people. I'd say, I'm not American. Like, why do you think I'm an American? Um, but I didn't realize that when I came to America, I figured out my identity was a lot more complex than maybe I realized as a teenager, and began to see like, okay, I relate a lot to Jamaica, but when I go back, people still don't view me as fully Jamaican. And I
Mhm.
relate to America more than I might have thought previously, but people here don't fully understand me as American. So
Mhm.
that kind of like
Mhm.
experience of missing the place where you're not, belonging in the other place where you're not, really fit for me. And so as soon as I knew other missionary kids who had lived somewhere a long time, I think I got it as well. You know, I met
Mhm.
met other people who had lived in Hungary for 18 years, or lived in China for 18 years, and I was like, "Oh,
Mhm.
you're a missionary kid. I'm a missionary kid." So that was kind of like permission to have
Hmm.
that label, and just to see there's a whole spectrum of experience of I have a big part of the MK experience from being overseas so long, but I
Mhm.
have like none of the high mobility. You know, like some of my friends who are MKs and TCKs, like
Yeah.
who have moved a lot, they relate a lot more to that high mobility piece of being an MK.
Yeah. Yeah. Makes sense. Well, just recently, you've been part of co writing the book Worlds Here and There, an activity book for international transition. And I'd love it as we're getting started with talking about this a bit more, if you can give the background of what led to creating this resource.
Yeah. So the fun thing about this was it actually started as an activity first. So my
Mm.
co-author Donna came up with this activity, maybe almost 20 years ago, and started using it with crew missionaries that were coming back from the field. What you can imagine is a big room full of missionaries like coming back. Either some are back for the summer, just for a break. Some are moving back for a new role, a new life in ministry, and some are moving back because they're leaving the organization. They're going on to something else entirely.
Hmm.
And so a huge variety of experiences in the room, a huge variety of life stages, single missionaries, married missionaries, missionary kids. And in that setting, this activity was created as like, how can we name and grieve the things that they're losing, you know,
Hmm.
name the things that are good and hard about what they're leaving behind, and look at what they're entering into. And so it started as a really simple activity. She used to probably like write and marker and then copy like the pages originally and staple them together, like just a label at the top of a blank page saying, for your world there, who are
Uh-huh.
the people on one page that you're leaving behind? What are the places that you're leaving behind? What are the things that you're leaving behind? And then the next set of pages here, what are you entering? Who are the people that still that you're entering into? What are the places that you're going to see again that you used to know? And so that simple activity was what was compelling to turn it into a resource. Was year after year when I got involved and started help helping to co-lead the activity, it felt like that was like where we were getting the best feedback out of anything we did. Like it was the most powerful activity for individuals and for families, and it was so unique that a family could work on it all together. Because in many of those spaces, it'd be that the MKs are having their program with us with MK and MK, and the adults are having their program with the adult staff care people. But this was one room and one setting where everybody's coming together and talking about and dealing with the same thing. And so I think that was part of the richness of the experience, that people were relating about what they're leaving behind and what they're losing. And so I can remember that one of the moments that made me think like, wow, this is really something powerful, is that simply having people fill out those pages here and there, and then asking them this question, like, what do you notice about your pages? Which pages are most blank and which pages are most full? That was like where the room would get completely silent, where you could hear a pin drop, and where people would cry the most. Because that just
Mhm.
like got to the heart of what they're losing and what they're entering into. And so that made me feel like, wow, like more people need to do this. So
Mhm.
fast forward like a few years after facilitating it a few times, I actually had that idea, and I was like, I think there's so many amazing books out there that are kind of like information or wisdom shared from people involved with globally mobile families. But there's not enough activities. Like there's not enough
Mhm.
things that are interactive and get you interacting with people within your family or within your team. And so I thought, before even coming up with this activity as a book, I thought we need more activities as books,
Mhm.
and maybe that's a way I can contribute. And so then when thought of, what if this could be like a self-guided activity, like take the activity,
Mhm. Mhm.
and for not everybody has that big room with lots of other people going through the move at the same time as them. Lots of other people, when they go through this kind of transition, they're on their own. They're
Mhm.
re-entering a church or re-entering a home where nobody else is going through the same thing. Maybe they've been serving on their own, and so I wanted to like reach those people, and especially beyond the missions community. Like I think I again and again am reminded that like there's so many other people moving internationally for business or for the military or for diplomacy, and nobody's thinking about their transition. you know,
Mhm.
Nobody's thinking about their emotional health, at least not within their organization. Usually, it's not. There's not as much of the care that many missions organizations put into it,
Mhm.
and so I would love for us to see this go to other people that are walking through difficult transitions, but who might not have the prayer and support of the missions community.
Mhm. Mhm.
I really appreciate the name of the resource and how you call it From World Here and There. And the first few times I read it, I definitely read World Here to There, assuming it
Yeah,
was kind of moving from one to the next, and that was the purpose. Can you tell us what's the title mean? What does that mean to you? How did you come up with it?
yeah. To me, worlds here and there captures this like aching loss of global transition. Like in a phrase, it's like you have this huge world that you're leaving behind. Your entire, like a life. You might be leaving a life behind, and that's what it can feel like. But you're also entering a whole new world. And I think that can be true going to a country for the first time, and I think it's especially true coming back. It kind of captures like to me the disorientation and reorientation of moving, of exiting and reentry. And I love that we use this word reentry for TCKs and missionaries, because who else uses the word reentry a lot? It's astronauts. And reentry seems like one of the scariest and most dangerous times of a space mission. That's what it feels like. Reentering and a flash of light and an explosive heat, like that can be what it feels like to come back to, be thrust into a world that you thought you knew, but has probably changed a lot while you've been gone. So here and there is really about the magnitude of both places,
Yeah.
and naming all of the different parts of both places.
Yeah.
So I love that our designer Josephine, she captured this really well with the cover, because she came up with the idea of using an airplane window, because I think
Mhm.
that's like a really holy and special place to a lot of people moving internationally. That once you've gone through all the prep to move, you've gone through all of the logistics and like craziness, and then suddenly you're in your airplane seat and like you have nothing to do but sit there. Or maybe you'll watch movies for like 12 hours like me, and that's not always the best thing to do. But this liminal space of looking out the airplane window and reflecting on what you're leaving behind and what you're entering. I love that we have an airplane window on the cover.
As you worked on this book, can I ask who's the primary audience? We talked a lot about TCKs and MKs, but also just missionaries going to the field for the first time. Is it both of those audiences? Is it primarily children? Kind of who's the audience?
Yes, yeah, great question. I think the people we're thinking of is the broadest possible category, like anybody moving to another country. So that's breaking a rule of publishing a book, that you should find the smallest possible audience of like, who are you really focusing on, who's your ideal reader. And so we definitely broke that with this of we didn't narrow it down to an ideal reader, in the same way like a novel might. But I think that's because like there's something so relatable to anybody moving to another country for the first time, or moving back. And
Mhm.
so we talk about kids and teenagers too, because we feel like we want a family to be able to use it together. And so it's kind of like I could break down our audience into multiple people, that
Mhm.
a single missionary or military person like moving to another country for the first time could do this book by themselves and really
Mhm.
benefit from it. And then
Mhm.
a family could use one book as a family. And that's one of the things we loved about designing the book the way we did is it's made so that we can open it up and have 2 blank pages open for a family to write on together, that each person can get a marker or a colored pencil and add their own thoughts to the people that they're leaving behind and the places that they're leaving behind. And
Mhm.
so I love having kind of both of those audiences in mind, because if you're
Mhm.
doing it by yourself, you can just have one page open, have the book in your lap, and be writing with a pen and thinking about the people. Because that's what I would
Mhm.
do. I'm not going to be coloring, but I know so many people will be coloring in
Why
it.
not? You get that marker out, Paul.
Yeah,
No, and I love how in the beginning you even lay out some of those instructions for, okay, if you're doing this with a group, if you're doing this as a family, as an individual. So it's helping to guide the user through that experience, whether they might also be attending a pre-field training and, going through intentional thought about their departure, or if they're totally on their own, like some of those groups you were describing before. That's great.
yeah. When I first came up with like doing it as a self-guided activity, it was fun because I didn't know who had actually created the activity in the first place. So I was going out to Salt Lake City to a wedding of another MK friend, and I was going to see my old team leader there. Donna had led MK to MK, and then she had moved to Colorado to be closer to family. And then I had started leading the team. And so because we were going to be at the wedding, I was like, oh, I should ask her about this activity. Like, I'd love to turn it into a self-guided book and self-published, but I don't know who created it. So what if I'm stealing someone's idea that, they've been sitting on for more than 10 years? Like, so I asked her and I said, hey, like, have you ever thought of, I feel like Worlds Here and There could be its own book. Like someone could use it on their own. They could have all the instructions they need to do it. They could share about it with other people still. But what if I turned it into that? Like, do you know who came up with it? And she said, oh, I came up with it. And then without really thinking about it more than a second or two, I was like, do you want to write a book with me then? And so that kind of became the journey of us working on it together, because immediately I was like, oh, you created it, let's do this together. So that was really a fun part of the journey, that it kept us in touch, that she
Mhm.
works with refugees now in Colorado Springs. And so she's kind of suddenly in a new audience of globally mobile people, completely different
Mhm.
reasons, different challenges and different realities. But she's thinking about some of the same things she
Mhm.
was with MK to MK. How do you deal with transition and grief and loss? How do you survive in the midst of these chaotic times? So I
Mhm.
really love that our 2 worlds have kind of continued to stay connected through writing the book together.
And let's take a short break for a story from the field.
My name is Stephanie Carametti, and I have been a missionary with Teach Beyond since 2017. And today I just want to share a little bit about my journey from short-term missions to long-term missions. Initially, I got plugged in with Teach Beyond to serve in a short-term camp in the Philippines in 2017. And that came about because I had just gotten my TOEFL certification, and I had just recently been saved, actually. Initially, before I came to know the Lord, I wanted to use my TOEFL to go to South Korea, teach English, make money, get away from home, and live my early 20s life the way that I wanted to. And after I came to know the Lord, he actually, showed me that he could use this TOEFL for his purposes and for his glory. And so that was when I started looking for missions opportunities to teach English abroad. I also wanted to still go long term. So I still had, my ideas of how this should look. And every time I knocked on one of those doors, it didn't open. But I didn't allow myself to get discouraged by that process. Instead, I looked at other ways that God might use this TOEFL for his kingdom. And that was how I got plugged into this trip to the Philippines. It was a short-term trip. It was 3 weeks. And I had a really great time. And it was that trip where the Lord revealed to me that this is what he had for me, that this is what he was going to have me doing long term, but it was a matter of waiting on him. So for the next 7 years, I continued serving with Teach Beyond camps, I moved over to the English camps in Moldova, and I eventually went from a teacher there to the North American supervisor. And the Lord used that entire experience to have me mentored and discipled and to grow in my faith and to mature as a person, and ultimately lead me to the point where I am now 8 years later, getting ready to go serve the Lord long term in Romania. So my encouragement is to, trust the Lord in this process. If this is something that He's calling you to, He is going to lead you there. It's just a matter of waiting on Him, being faithful during the journey, and not forcing things to go the way that you want, but to be fully surrendered to Him. That was what I did. Not without, any wrestling, but ultimately releasing that to the Lord and trusting Him to work it out. And I'm so happy I did, because I cannot wait to get to Bucharest Christian Academy this summer and start this ministry. Thank you so much.
For our weekly spotlight, we are focusing on Puebla Christian School in Mexico. If you would like to find out more, visit teachbeyond.org/go or click on the link in the show notes.
And now back to our conversation with Paul.
Well, talk us through, Paul, each of the sections of this book. How is this set up for someone who's never opened it before? How can they imagine what this book is like?
Yeah. So if you open up the book, like many, it starts with a table of contents, and I can just kind of walk through that in my imaginary book reveal to someone that we wanted this to be as accessible to anyone as possible. And so we kind of had two audiences in mind that, you could be entering this book and you've never talked about transition or grief, or you don't know what a TCK is. Like, and if you're in that camp like that, this is a great thing to start with. It's accessible. And so there's several pages on just explaining that, of like, what is transition, why a story to start, of like, why is it difficult to come back to a place that you've lived before, what does it mean to go through reentry, but it's very short. Like, we wanted to give people a taste of that, but we know there's so many other people out there who have written more about those things and said it better than we can say right now of going through transition or grief or loss. So the beginning is a little bit of that, of inviting you into your own story and thinking through what do these words mean, and why it's important to talk about it. Then after that kind of like theory or engaging with the story, we give some practical instruction. So there's like a 2-page section that's just a roadmap for doing the activity. And I love that, because if you could open to any page and just start with reading as little as possible, you could start there. You could look at those 2 pages and know what to do with the rest of the book. And the roadmap just walks through, if you're doing it on your own or if you're doing it with a family, you need to get supplies. You just need to get markers or colored pencils. You need to prepare and set a time to do it. And then you need to sit down and start writing and collecting your thoughts on the activity. So those instructions are really something we spent probably the most time on. It's funny how a book like this, you spend a ton of time on pages with like very few words on them, because it's like very important what those words are and how the instructions will land on someone.
Yeah.
And it was very new for us, where we'd explained it, hundreds of times in person with a large group of people, but explaining how to do it on the page to someone you don't know who's reading it is a very different task. So those are the 2 sections kind of like before the activity starts. Then after that, the bulk of the book, and the whole book, just so someone gets an idea, is about 68 pages long. So it's very small, but it's a letter-sized book, in the sense that like it's the size of a sheet of printer paper. So it's a tall book, but not a thick book. And we did it that way for the sake of, this can fit in the small part of a carry-on, like on the outside. It's wide, but it's not thick. Like, I always get annoyed when I'm packing a book and it's too thick and it makes the outside of my carry-on bulge too much, but this
Yes.
is thin. So those pages in the middle, the most of the pages in the book in the middle, are all about the activity itself, and they're mostly blank. And so that's where we go through.
Mhm.
The first section is there, and we allow you, like, we invite people to say, like, you get to decide what is there and what is here. Like, you might, when you hear that and you're thinking of two places you're in between right now, you might have an idea right away of like what's there and what's here. What does it feel like? But how we define it or suggest using it if you don't have a preference is there is the place you're not. So if I'm
Yeah.
about to
Yeah.
move to a new place, that place should be there.
Yeah.
Or if I've just returned to the US for the summer, the other place is there and the US is here. So here should be the place you are. So it's I think it's logical when you think about it that way, and it just helps with like the flow of the book. But so the first section there and the second section here are almost identical, except that they one has a different set of like kind of guiding questions than the other. So on each page, like within that activity section, the first will be the places. So 2 pages blank that have lots of space for you to write about all the places that you know there, and then the next section, all the places that you know here. And at the top of the first page for both of those is a set of questions just to get you started. Like we talked about it for a long time of like, do we want questions on the page? Because that might limit, what people think should
Right.
fit in
Yeah.
places. But we also want to help someone get started. So if you're just looking at the blank page and you're like, I have no idea what places are important to me.
Yeah.
Some people, when you just say places, they'll be like, okay, this place and the ice cream shop and the restaurant down the street. And this is the place we went on our first date. And they'll have all of those categories in mind. But someone who doesn't, run wild like that, like they might want some of the questions to help them think through the kinds of places that they should be writing down. The sections go from places, people, memories, activities, things, and excess baggage. So it's kind of a last category to catch all anything that you're missing that didn't make it into these other categories. But for both there and here, those are all of the pages that we invite people to fill out. So ranging from places, some of the categories are a lot easier to think through than others, but we loved adding both memories and activities as kind of two different things. That you have memories of people and places, but also memories kind of deserve their own space because you have so many memories inside of your home. So when you write home as one of the places, or the apartment on Fifth Street, like if you write that as your place, that doesn't really capture all of what you're losing when you're losing that place, and so having memories as like what about the time the water heater broke and flooded our apartment? That's something that wouldn't happen, that wouldn't make it onto a place or an activity, even though you could define it that way too. So that's the whole kind of like activity, the main activity that the book is built around, is like filling out those pages together. And that's really what takes the most time when someone will sit down to do it. And we recommend like spending an hour to 2 hours like doing this, doing the activity itself. Right after those activity pages, there's reflection questions and kind of like processing, like looking at my pages, like which pages are empty and which pages are full. Which pages was I surprised to fill up, or what's something that I didn't expect to write down, but then I did write down. Then there's other layers of processing, of asking, like, one optional thing to do is go back, especially as a family or as a team, this could be valuable, is like to go back and add an emotion word to the different things that you wrote down. Because each of these things that you're writing down, like many of them might be things that you feel warm remembering them, or you feel grateful remembering them. But some of the things you write down, depending on where you're at in transition, could have a lot of other feelings attached. Sadness for losing them, anger for someone taking them away. So adding that extra layer of like processing is what that next section is all about. Like, I think we say it in there. I was like, you've kind of done half the work right now. Like, don't stop here. Keep going with thinking through what your experience has been like. So that's the processing section. And then after that, there's like 6 additional activities that are optional things to do, of like, from here, go and do some more processing. And like we thought of them as like kind of great supplements to this main activity, or standalone things like anybody could do. And so they range from like a creative poetry activity to kind of like name some of the feelings and experiences that you're losing, and ranging to a very practical scavenger hunt, like thinking through, you're in a
Mhm.
new place now, or you've moved back to where you used to live. How can you intentionally reacquaint yourself with this place? Because that can be one of the challenges of re-entering, and then moving to a new place. It can also be scary to get to know somewhere. So um, yeah, those are some of the variety that we put into the additional activities. And then the very last thing is just a short page of additional resources. Like, here are the very short list of books that we'd recommend and websites that we'd recommend, because we wanted this as, like, we're thinking of that person who has never talked about cross-cultural transition, or they're brand new to this idea that um, about moving. And so that page is like, all right, you've opened the door, like, here are some more rooms to go and explore.
Mhm. Mhm.
I love how this book is so interactive. I love how there's ways to engage in just the drawing, the writing on the pages, filling it up. At the back of the book, you have all those additional activities, like you mentioned. Maybe you can't say that you have a favorite one, but if there's one that you would just hear somebody talk about, I did the book and I didn't do any of the activities, which one would you feel like they missed out on? If you're like, maybe just do this one activity, what would that be?
Yeah, I think the one right now that I love the most is it's called Snapshot Stories, and it's off of a family and crew, like, actually recommended this as something that they had done, and they told me, like, what they did with their own family, and I was like, that is an amazing activity and it's so simple, can I please steal it? And they said, of course. Like, that's why I'm telling you, like, please put it in. And so the simple idea is that everyone in your team, if you're an individual or a group of people leaving, or if you're a single, like, missionary or TCK, like, moving on your own, that you would pick 5 photos, and these would represent the place you're leaving. And so you could do it this way of, like, these are my top 5 photos. Like, if someone asks me, like, tell me about your world, I could show them these 5 photos and they would know my world a lot better. Or you could do it by picking a photo that represents each of the categories in the book. So you could choose a photo that represents a place that is really
Uh-huh.
special to you, a person that you're leaving behind, a memory that you have, an activity that you used to do there, and a thing or a sacred object that you had to leave behind. So choosing those 5 photos, and then from there, sharing them. So in a family,
Mhm.
that's a easy thing to do, of like, well, we're going to all go around and we're going to share them. Or I know other people who, like, put it into a group slideshow and kind of went through it together, and had each person share about
Nice.
each photo that they selected. And I love it because in that setting, you might assume what people are going to pick, but you're going to be surprised, and you get to kind of, like, understand more of the nuance and the variety of what people in the group think. And I love, another reason I love the activity is I had the idea to add some instruction of, like, what if you're making this transition completely on your own? How can you do that activity in a way that doesn't sound lonely? Like, not just pick 5 photos and, like, add them to your favorites. Great, like, that's kind of sad. But what I put was, suggested, like, for individuals doing this, like, pick your 5 photos and don't stop there. Choose 5 different people and just send them a text and say, hey, I moved and I left Jamaica and I'm missing it today, and I wanted to share with this. I wanted to share this picture with you as something I was thinking about.
Yeah.
And I wrote that instruction and said, like, this is a way for self advocacy and for sharing about your transition that is natural. Like, sending someone a photo who is your friend or your family and just sharing that small paragraph, that might feel uncomfortable or unnatural, but who is going to read that and respond badly to that? Like, so many people are going to be like, wow, like, thank you for sharing that. Or if they don't say that, they at least have a little bit of a picture into what you're leaving behind, and it can spark a conversation for them, what their life is like, and for you, what you're leaving. And so that was my challenge of, like, you're going through this on your own, pick a picture and send it to someone, because that's a way to involve people into what you're going through.
Mhm. Mhm. Yeah. Paul, it sounds like you have really invested yourself in this process of distilling things down, deciding what's going to go in the book, and like thinking about these different topics. And, you know, that has an impact on us when we're the one who's working through something, even though you were familiar with some of these activities and the idea of having these two worlds you've navigated between. It's different when you're making it something that's going to get handed out to other people and they're going to need to run with it. So I'm curious for you and maybe for others involved in the process, what have you gleaned through working on this resource?
Yeah, I think one thing that stood out to me in the process has been it's never too late to grieve a past transition. Like, I think I realized something funny when I started sharing about and thinking about transition. During this past year, my wife and I moved from an apartment to the house that we just bought. And so in December was when we were moving, and in the months leading up to it, we were very intentional of talking about, we're going to miss our apartment, we're going to miss our
Mhm.
neighbors, we're going to miss the bakery that we can walk to across the street, we're going to miss the stray cats in our neighborhood and the lady who feeds them and the people who complain about them. You know, all of these things that we've learned about our neighborhood and gotten to enjoy, we're going to lose them. And so reflecting on that after, you know, spending time walking and talking about what we'd miss and what we hoped for, I realized, wait a minute, I've spent more time grieving this apartment than I spent grieving Jamaica.
Huh.
And that's just because of the place I was in life. I was moving to college.
Yeah.
I didn't know that, you know, grieving was a thing. I didn't know that that was part of transitioning well. And so now I've like, wow, I think I want to go back and do this book
Hmm.
for myself as an 18-year-old. You know, what was I
Mhm.
leaving behind? What were the people and the places and things that I left in Jamaica, and what have I entered and gained in America? So
Mm.
I have more processing to do and more grieving to do for myself
Mm.
personally. And that was a good realization that it's not too late. You know, part of me could say, well, that happened, I did it badly, and tough luck.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
a more generous and graceful response to myself is, actually, there is time to name those things and
Mm.
sit with myself
Mm.
as a
Yeah.
grieving TCK that didn't have the vocabulary and didn't have the support that I could have benefited from.
Yeah.
So that was
Yeah.
one thing personally, like that has kind of bubbled up in the process.
It sounds like it would be this book is helpful whether you've already made that transition, even if it was, recent, or you're anticipating that transition. Like, the timing isn't necessarily the golden aspect of this, it's doing it. And so even for you looking way back, this is helping you walk through that transition in retrospect. Probably helpful to do it in, like, the when it's recent history, to then actively be able to work through that, but that it isn't limited to, you have to quick get this done before you get on an airplane, or that you have to, quick get this done right when you arrive. That it's part of the process, like, bigger picture.
Yeah, 100%. Like, that's something that I really believe is that, yeah, you could do this right as you're leaving. You could do half of the book in one place and half of the book in another place,
You
or you
just
could do,
got to pick your here and there, right?
yeah,
Like, stick with
exactly,
one here, one there.
yeah.
That's good.
In the process of writing a book, it's been enjoyable and has got me thinking about the creative process and like how boundaries and deadlines have really helped in this process because I can see now, like, something I've talked about recently is, so like, it's so easy as time goes on for a project to evolve and to change shape, and then it's, you know, 5 years before you've really like finished your first draft.
Hmm.
And because of working on this with Donna, like, because of having like meetings every week, like with her, like, we really treated it like a work project in our free time. And
Hmm.
so that really benefited us in having, like, we're working on this together. So we can't just leave this to die
Hmm.
and like the ideas drawer, you know. And so we really helped each other in the sense that there was times when I was busy with MK and I'd be gone the whole summer,